Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the heavy oak gates of a medieval castle. The air is damp, cool, and faintly smelling of smoke from the great hall's hearth. You're standing on uneven cobblestones, the echo of your own footsteps bouncing off the towering walls. Torchlight flickers along the passageways, casting long shadows that sway as if they've been here for centuries, quietly keeping watch. In the distance, you hear the creak of a drawbridge, the faint snort of a horse in the stables, and the muffled chatter of guards swapping stories to pass the long night. It feels safe, and yet you probably wouldn't survive long here without a thick cloak, a sharp mind, and friends in the right places. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself wandering deeper into the castle grounds. The world outside is long gone, peasants tilling fields, traders haggling in the market square, all swallowed by thick curtain walls and a deep moat. Within these walls, life moves at a slower, steadier pace, yet every creak of wood and clang of iron reminds you that this is a place built for defense, not comfort. You can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing in around you. The first thing you notice is how narrow the windows are, barely wide enough to let in a sliver of gray daylight. They're less for looking out than for keeping arrows from coming in. You pause near one and glance outside. The view is of a fog-blanketed valley, the pale outline of distant hills barely visible. Somewhere beyond them lies the rest of the world. But here in the castle, it's as though you've stepped into a small, self-contained universe. As you make your way toward the great hall, the air grows warmer. You pass servants carrying baskets of bread and pitchers of watered ale, their woolen tunics rough to the touch. One of them gives you a polite nod before disappearing into a side corridor, a reminder that this is a working household, alive with the constant motion of people who know exactly where they're going. The great hall is vast and dim, its ceiling lost in shadows above the timber beams. A long wooden table stretches nearly the length of the room, flanked by heavy benches. At the far end, a raised dais holds the Lord's seat, an ornate chair carved with twisting vines and strange creatures. This is the heart of castle life, a place for meals, for gatherings, for dispensing justice. Tonight, it is quiet, the fire in the central hearth, crackling softly, the smell of wood smoke mingling with the faint tang of roasting meat. You take a seat near the hearth. The heat seeps into your bones, chasing away the chill of the outer corridors. Above you, a tapestry hangs against the stone wall, its colors faded, but still showing the story of a long-ago battle, men in mail shirts and conical helmets charging forward, banners whipping in the wind. You trace the stitches with your eyes and realize that the history of this place is sewn into every thread, every stone. Life in the castle is not all feasts and finery. As you step outside the hall and follow a winding staircase upward, the air grows colder again. You find yourself in a narrow passage lined with wooden doors. These are the private chambers where the Lord's family sleeps and stores their belongings. The rooms are small, lit by a single candle or a low fire, and though the beds are draped in furs, the stone walls leak cold no matter the season. In winter, frost creeps along the edges of the shutters. In summer, the air is heavy and still. Servants scurry quietly in the background, carrying fresh rushes to strew on the floors or refilling jugs of water for washing. Privacy is a rare luxury here. Doors are thin and walls carry sound. You realize that while a castle may be a fortress, it is not always a peaceful place to live. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the shouting of stable hands, the constant coming and going of messengers, all form the endless hum of daily life. But the castle's true strength lies in its defenses. You climb another flight of steps and emerge onto the battlements. The wind hits you full in the face, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant rain. From here you can see the moat far below its dark water rippling in the torchlight. Beyond that, an open field stretches toward the forest, a killing ground for any enemy foolish enough to approach. The walls are thick, the towers tall, and every angle offers a place for defenders to rain arrows or boiling oil down upon attackers. You lean against the cold stone, looking out over the quiet landscape. Tonight, there is no danger, only the distant call of an owl and the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Still, the watchmen keep their vigil, pacing slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. It's their job to notice the first sign of trouble, to raise the alarm before the enemy is at the gates. Descending again, you pass through the inner courtyard, where chickens scratch at the dirt, and a pair of dogs lounge near the stables. A few stable boys are bedding down the horses for the night, the animals snorting softly as they settle. The smell of hay and manure is sharp in the air, mingling with the dampness that clings to every stone surface. Somewhere nearby, the chapel bell tolls a low, steady sound, marking the evening hour. Inside the small stone chapel is lit by flickering candles, the scent of beeswax mixing with the faint trace of incense. A monk in a plain brown robe kneels before the altar, his voice a low murmur in prayer. This is as much a part of castle life as the clamor of the great hall, faith woven into the rhythm of the day, a reminder of life's fragility in an age when war, disease, and famine could arrive without warning. You leave the chapel and step back into the cool night air. Overhead, the sky is scattered with stars, the moon casting pale light across the rooftops. Somewhere in the darkness, a watchman's footsteps echo softly, and the castle seems to breathe around you, a living thing holding centuries of history within its walls. You wrap your cloak tighter and make your way toward the guest quarters. The night is only beginning, and there is much more to see, to hear, to feel within these stone walls before the first light of dawn touches the horizon. And so, with quiet steps, you continue your journey through the sleeping heart of the castle. The guest quarters are modest compared to the Lord's chambers, but in the 14th century, even this is a rare privilege. You push open a heavy wooden door to find a narrow bed with a straw-stuffed mattress, a wool blanket folded neatly at the foot. A single iron candlestick rests on a small table, its wax pooled and hardened from previous nights. The air smells faintly of tallow and old rushes. You set down your bundle, perhaps a spare tunic, maybe a flask of ale, and pause to listen. Somewhere down the corridor, the faint sound of a lute drifts through the stones, soft and unhurried. It is easy to imagine yourself lying here staring at the timbered ceiling as the song fades into the night. But your curiosity wins over comfort. You decide to keep exploring before sleep claims you. Pulling the door closed behind you, you tread softly along the corridor, the soles of your boots whispering against the worn planks. A spiral staircase beckons its steps, narrow and uneven, spiraling tightly around a central pillar. You know these staircases were built this way on purpose so that a defender moving down the stairs could swing a sword more freely against an attacker climbing up. Your hand grazes the cold stone of the inner wall, as you ascend, circling upward into another part of the keep. You emerge into the solar, a warmer, more private chamber used by the lady of the castle and her family. Here the air is softer, tinged with the faint fragrance of lavender and beeswax polish. Cushioned chairs line the hearth, and a loom sits in one corner with half-woven cloth draped across it. A few ladies sit together embroidering by candlelight, their voices low and even. The flicker of the flames makes the gold and scarlet threads in their work shimmer faintly. You're aware that in this space the life of the castle feels gentler, the harshness of stone softened by fabric warmth and quiet conversation. Still, even here you can sense the underlying rhythm of duty. For these noble women, the day has been filled with managing servants, overseeing kitchens, and ensuring the smooth running of the household. The embroidery is more than pastime. It is a way to create costly goods for the family's honor and alliances. Every stitch is a subtle currency in the politics of marriage and kinship. Leaving the solar, you descend to the kitchens, where a different kind of heat engulfs you. The ceiling is low, the walls blackened with soot, and the air thick with the scent of roasting meat herbs and fresh bread. A massive fireplace dominates one wall big enough to roast an entire boar on its spit. Cooks move quickly around the space. One chops onions, another stirs a pot of pottage thick with barley and vegetables. Servants bustle in and out with baskets of apples, sacks of flour, and bundles of leeks. The kitchen is the castle's heartbeat, and it runs long into the night. Even now, someone is preparing food for the guards on late watch. A large table in the corner holds trenchers of bread, coarse brown loaves for the garrison, finer white bread for the lord's family. On the floor, barrels of ale and cider wait to be tapped, while hooks overhead hold strings of onions and garlic, keeping them safe from rodents. From here, a narrow passage leads to the buttery and pantry where food and drink are stored and measured out. In the buttery, a servant stands with a set of tall wooden measures, carefully pouring ale into pitchers for distribution. In the pantry, another servant tallies loaves and cuts of meat, noting what must be used soon and what can be salted or smoked for later. Waste is not an option here. Winters are long, and supplies must be rationed wisely. You slip outside through a postern door, emerging into the castle's inner yard. It's quieter now, but a few torches flicker along the walls, casting their light on the cobbled ground. You pass the blacksmith's workshop, its forge banked for the night, though the smell of scorched iron still lingers. Outside, a rack of half-finished spearheads leans against the palsu, each one destined for a guard's hand. Crossing the yard, you find the brewhouse where a lone woman stirs a vat of ale, her arms moving in a slow, steady rhythm. Brewing is an almost daily task here. Ale is safer to drink than most water and forms a staple of every meal. The brew's scent drifts toward you, earthy, yeasty, faintly sweet. She nods in greeting, but keeps her focus on the work, mindful of the brew's delicate timing. Beyond the brewhouse stands the bakehouse. You peek inside to see the low dome of the oven glowing faintly from a recent firing. The smell of baked bread clings to the air, mingled with wood smoke. In the morning, this place will be bustling again, turning out dozens of loaves for the day ahead. Moving along the outer wall, you approach the gatehouse. Two guards stand at the portcullis, their spears upright, their eyes alert despite the calm. The gatehouse is the castle's first line of defense, a complex of murder holes, arrow slits, and thick wooden doors reinforced with iron. Above you, the portcullis looms a spiked lattice of oak and steel that can drop in seconds to seal the entrance. You run your hand lightly along the cold, ridged surface, imagining the sound it would make if suddenly released. One of the guards greets you quietly, offering a flask. The ale is warm but welcome against the night's chill. You share a few words about the weather, the harvest, the uneventful watch before moving on toward the towers. Climbing again, you reach the highest point of the keep, the lookout tower. Here, the wind is sharper, carrying the scent of pine from distant woods. Below, the land rolls away in moonlit folds, fields, rivers, and dark forests stretching toward the horizon. The guards here are more silent, their eyes fixed outward, listening to the quiet, as much as scanning the darkness. From up here, you sense the isolation of castle life. It is a fortress, yes, but also a world apart, sealed against the dangers beyond the walls. In winter, snow might bury the roads for weeks, cutting off all but the most determined travelers. In times of war, the castle becomes both shield and prison, safe from attackers, yet bound within its walls. You descend once more, the wind still clinging to your cloak. Passing through the great hall again, you see that the fire has burned lower, its embers glowing red beneath the ash. A few men linger here, speaking in low voices over cups of ale, but most have gone to their beds. You take a last walk through the quiet corridors. The stones hold the day's warmth in some places, in others they are as cold as ice. You pass closed doors, each with its own stories behind them. A squire dreaming of battle, a servant curled beneath thin blankets, a noblewoman writing by candlelight. The castle is never truly still, but it rests, gathering its strength for the day to come. Your own bed awaits. In the guest chamber, the candle has burned low, its light trembling against the walls. You lie down, pulling the blanket up to your chin, the faint scratch of the wool against your skin. Outside, the wind sighs along the battlements. You close your eyes, and for a moment, it's easy to believe you've always been here, tucked safely inside these ancient walls. You wake in the small hours, not from any loud noise, but from the subtle shifts of life that never fully stop inside a castle. Somewhere beyond your chamber door, a guard's boots scrape softly against the stone. A hinge creaks as someone opens a door down the corridor. Faint voices drift from below, perhaps servants stoking kitchen fires so bread can be ready by dawn. The air in your chamber is cool, and the wool blanket heavy on your chest. The faint scent of tallow lingers from the stub of a candle that went out during the night. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet meeting the rough, uneven floorboards. The silence is deep, but never absolute. Slipping on your cloak, you step into the corridor. It is lit only by the faint orange glow of a wall-mounted torch at the far end. Shadows pool in the corners. As you make your way along, you pass a narrow slit window. Outside, the sky is of velvet black stars, faint against the darker silhouette of the surrounding hills. A few torches flicker along the battlements, their flames bending in the wind. You decide to visit the courtyard. Descending a spiral stair, you emerge into the chill of the night air. The ground glistens faintly as if touched by dew. Somewhere nearby, a horse stamps in its stall. You hear the gentle clink of metal as a stable boy adjusts a harness. He gives you a small nod, but says nothing, moving quietly, so as not to disturb the animals more than necessary. The yard is more peaceful at this hour than in the day's bustle. You pass the well at the center, a deep shaft lined with stone, its bucket resting against the winch. In daylight, servants would gather here to draw water for washing, cooking, and brewing. Now it sits silent, reflecting a sliver of moonlight. Drawn toward the gatehouse again, you find the night watch exchanging a few quiet words. One is rubbing his hands together for warmth, the other scanning the distant tree line. Their discipline is unyielding. Even on a calm night, eyes remain sharp. You pause, looking out through the portcullis toward the road that winds away from the castle. In the distance, you see nothing but darkness, though your imagination fills it with unseen travelers, or perhaps a lone wolf crossing the fields. Returning across the yard, you slip through a small doorway leading to the chapel. Inside, the cool stillness wraps around you instantly. The stone floor is cold beneath your boots. A single lamp burns before the altar, casting a soft circle of light over the carved figure of the Virgin and Child. In the front pew, an old priest kneels in silent prayer, lips moving faintly. His robe pools around him, and the candlelight makes his lined face seem almost carved from stone. This is one of the castle's quietest spaces, a place set apart from politics, chores, and military duties. For many within these walls, it is a refuge, a reminder that life has meaning beyond survival and duty. Here in the stillness, the air smells faintly of incense and wax. You leave the chapel as quietly as you entered. The courtyard's cold air bites at your face again. As you turn toward the inner keep, you notice the faintest light beginning to touch the horizon, not quite dawn, but the slow hint of it. The eastern sky carries a whisper of silver and pale blue. Inside, you make your way toward the kitchens, drawn by the low rumble of activity. Already the fire in the great hearth is roaring. The cooks are busy kneading dough, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. On a large table, dough rounds are covered with cloth rising slowly in the warmth. A pot of pottage simmers nearby, its scent earthy with leeks and root vegetables. One of the kitchen girls offers you a cup of warm ale, lightly spiced. It chases away the chill as you watch the morning's work take shape. Bread will be ready soon, but already trenchers' thick slabs of coarse bread are being sliced to serve as edible plates for the first meal. From the kitchen, you follow a servant to the buttery, where kegs of ale are being tapped and poured into jugs. In the pantry, another servant inspects the stores, smoked fish wrapped in cloth, salted pork, hanging from hooks, onions braided and hung from rafters. Winter is always a concern, and stock must be carefully monitored so that the castle can endure weeks or even months without outside supply. Leaving the warmth of the kitchens, you cross through the great hall. Sunlight is beginning to filter through the narrow windows, now glancing off the polished wood of the high table. Servants move quickly here, setting places for the morning meal. The Lord's chair is already laid with a clean napkin, a silver cup, and a trencher of fine white bread, a luxury not afforded to everyone in the castle. As the day begins, the castle stirs in earnest. Guards change shifts, their replacements striding toward posts on the walls. The smithy's hammer rings out, echoing sharply in the morning air. The clatter of hooves announces the arrival of a messenger at the gate. His cloak is dusty, and his horse is lathered from the ride. He dismounts quickly, handing a sealed parchment to the guard captain before leading his mount toward the stables. In the yard, women are already at work at the laundry troughs, sleeves rolled high, hands red from the cold water. They pound linen against smooth boards, rinsing and wringing, before hanging the clothes on lines strung along the walls. The smell of soaproot mixes with the fresh scent of morning air. Nearby children chase one another around a pile of firewood, their laughter ringing out in sharp contrast to the steady rhythm of chores. These are the sons and daughters of servants and soldiers, castle-born, their lives shaped entirely by the rise and fall of these stone walls. You wander toward the gardens inside the outer wall. Though modest, they provide the kitchen with herbs, onions, leeks, and sometimes berries in season. Now, in early spring, small green shoots are beginning to push through the dark earth. A gardener works slowly with a wooden rake, pausing now and then to straighten his back and glance at the sky. Following a narrow lane along the wall, you reach the kennels. Hunting dogs bark and pace, their eyes bright with anticipation. A boy scatters feed for the hounds, his laughter mingling with their excited whines. These dogs are prized not just for sport, but also for the meat they help bring to the Lord's table, deer boar, and sometimes wildfowl. The castle is now fully awake. From the armory, you hear the scrape of whetstones as weapons are sharpened. In the courtyard, a group of young squires practice with wooden swords, their blows clattering against each other's shields. A grizzled master-at-arms barks corrections, his voice cutting through the crisp air. Dust rises from the ground beneath their boots. All around you, the rhythm of the day unfolds with precision born of necessity. Every roll from the lowliest stable hand to the Lord himself contributes to the survival and order of the castle. There is little room for idleness. Even leisure here often has purpose. As the sun clears the walls and spills fully into the courtyard, you realize how the castle shifts from night to day, from quiet watchfulness to bustling industry, each phase a seamless part of its living cycle. And somewhere within these walls, your own day is just beginning. The bustle of the morning meal has begun to settle into the steady hum of daily work. You've lingered in this courtyard long enough to see the squires finish their sparring, their flushed faces beaded with sweat despite the cool air. They clatter away toward the armory, each carrying their own dented wooden shield, as if it were a badge of honor. You turn toward the great hall again, curious to see how the morning meal unfolds. Inside, the long tables are now mostly occupied. The high table set on the raised dais hosts the Lord, his family, and a few favored guests. Their breakfast is a spread of trenchers piled with slices of cold roast meat, soft cheese, and small loaves of fine bread. There is also a jug of warmed, spiced wine steaming faintly in the cool air. Lower down the hall, the fare is simpler. Barley bread pottage thick with cabbage and onion, perhaps a salted herring if the stores are generous. Cups of ale and small beer are passed along the benches, the liquid safer to drink than most water. The air is filled with the scrape of knives on wood and the low murmur of conversation. Servants weave through the crowded benches, refilling jugs and clearing empty trenchers. They work quickly, knowing that as soon as the meal ends, their tasks will shift again. Washing the wooden platters in the kitchen yard, scrubbing tables, sweeping rushes from the floor. This is the unending cycle of service in the castle: feed, clean, prepare, repeat. You notice that the great hearth has been stoked to life again, sending its warmth spilling into the room. Above it hangs a cauldron on a long iron chain, its contents bubbling quietly. This will simmer all day, the broth deepening in flavor as scraps of meat and vegetables are added. By evening, it will become the night's main meal. When the Lord rises from the table, conversation quiets slightly, and all eyes flick toward him. His day will be spent partly in governance, hearing disputes, managing lands, and perhaps conferring with his steward about accounts and supplies. For a moment, You imagine the constant balancing act of such a role warrior judge, host, protector. The weight of the castle's survival rests as much on decisions made in this hall as on the strength of its walls. You slip outside again, the sunlight now strong enough to warm your shoulders. The air smells faintly of baking bread drifting from the kitchens and the sharper tang of the smithy's forge. The blacksmith is already at work, his hammer ringing out in slow, deliberate strikes. Sparks fly in bright arcs each time metal meets metal. Nearby, an apprentice works the bellows, the rush of air feeding the fire until it glows white at its heart. From here, you wander toward the stables. The stable yard is alive with movement, grooms brushing horses, boys carrying buckets of water, the muffled thud of hooves on packed earth. A destrier, a great warhorse, stands tethered, its dark coat shining its massive head, turning as you approach. Its breath steams in the cool air, and it stamps once as though aware of its own power. In another corner, a smaller palfrey is saddled for a journey. Its rider, a well-dressed messenger, is checking the straps on his saddlebags. A guard hands him a sealed pouch, likely carrying letters or instructions for another estate. Within moments, he swings into the saddle, nods once, and guides his horse toward the gate. The clop of hooves fades as he disappears down the road. The morning hours in the castle are also a time for craftsmen. Passing through a covered walkway, you see the carpenter's shop. Here, men work with adzes and planes, shaping timber into beams, barrels, and wheel hubs. The smell of fresh-cut wood mixes with the metallic tang of the forge not far away. On a bench lies the beginnings of a new chest iron bands waiting nearby to strengthen its frame. In another corner of the yard, a tanner works with grim efficiency. His leather is soaked and stretched, scraped with sharp knives to prepare it for armor straps, saddles, or pouches. The smell is pungent, and you can almost taste the tang of curing hides in the air. Near midday, the castle's inner yard becomes a crossroads of purpose. Guards drill in the sun, their polished helmets flashing. Servants carry baskets of laundry from the drying lines. The kitchen sends boys with trays of bread to feed the workers. A few women stand in the shade, gossiping quietly while mending linens. In this moment, the castle feels less like a fortress and more like a small village enclosed by walls. Every skill, every trade, every pair of hands is part of the delicate machinery that keeps life moving. Even the smallest lapse, a spoiled barrel of ale, a neglected repair in the outer wall, could have serious consequences in a place that depends entirely on itself for survival. By early afternoon, you find yourself drawn to the training yard again. Here the squires and young knights are now sparring in earnest with blunted steel blades. The clash of metal rings loud against the stone walls. A master-at-arms corrects their stances, his voice sharp with authority. He knows these boys may one day be the castle's defenders in a siege, and sloppy technique now could mean disaster later. Beyond the training yard lies the archery butts, simple mounds of earth, with straw-stuffed targets set against them. Archers loose arrows in steady rhythm, the bowstrings snapping back and forth in a familiar, almost soothing sound. Each shaft thuds into straw, some striking the painted bullseye, others lodging wide. A Fletcher waits nearby, collecting damaged arrows to re-feather and straighten later. Not far away, the falconer tends to his birds. Hooded and tethered, the falcons stand calm on their perches, their sharp talons gripping the wooden rests. Hunting with hawks is a noble pastime, but also a practical one, providing fresh game for the table. The falconer strokes a bird's sleek feathers, murmuring softly as he checks its jesses. By mid-afternoon, the castle settles into a slower rhythm. The sun is warm, and a few guards lean lazily on their spears, their eyes still scanning the distance, but with less urgency than at dawn. Children's laughter drifts from somewhere near the bakehouse, mingling with the rhythmic thud of kneading from within. The scent of yeast and warm flour rides the breeze. Inside the hall, the steward sits at a long table with parchment and quill tallying accounts. His ink-stained fingers move quickly, his lips pursed in concentration. Each entry represents food wages, rents collected from surrounding lands, the numbers that decide whether the castle thrives or struggles through the coming months. You pause in a quiet alcove near the chapel door. A servant is polishing a silver chalice, its surface catching the light in tiny flares. Nearby, a pair of monks speak softly over a bundle of rolled parchments, perhaps letters from the abbey or a copy of some sacred text. The rhythm of life here is not just physical labor, but also record-keeping worship and the slow passing of information. By the time the afternoon shadows lengthen, the smell of cooking fires rises again from the kitchens. Meat roasts slowly on spits, fat dripping into the flames. Herbs are chopped and dropped into simmering pots. The hum of work grows stronger in anticipation of the evening meal. And so the cycle continues, the castle's heart beating with the same steady rhythm it has known for centuries. The sun may be lowering, but life within these walls will carry on well into the night. You find yourself moving once more toward the great hall, ready to watch the castle transform again as day gives way to evening. By the time you return to the great hall, the air has grown cooler, and shadows have begun to stretch across the flagstones. The vast hearth blazes anew, logs crackling, sending a warm glow over the benches and the high table. Servants move briskly through the room, laying out trenchers, arranging jugs of ale and wine, and setting platters in preparation for the evening meal. The smell of roasting meat and spiced broth drifts in from the kitchens, mingling with the faint resin scent of the burning wood. The Lord arrives first, his heavy cloak dusted with the day's journeys through the outer yard. He takes his place at the high table, exchanging quiet words with the steward at his side. A few moments later, the lady of the castle enters her gown, trailing softly over the rushes. She smiles faintly at a handful of guests, already seated nearby, visiting knights perhaps, or retainers from neighboring lands. The benches fill quickly. Down the length of the hall, soldiers and servants take their places, some still flushed from the day's labor. The low hum of conversation rises as cups are filled, and the first platters are brought in steaming joints of venison trenchers, piled high with root vegetables and bowls of thick pottage. A roasted goose, its skin crisped to a deep golden brown, takes pride of place at the high table. A hush falls for the blessing. The chaplain steps forward, hands clasped, his voice carrying just enough to reach the far corners of the hall. The prayer is brief but solemn, a reminder of gratitude in a world where fortune can turn quickly. With a murmur of amen, the feast begins. You watch as serving boys hurry between the kitchen and the hall, balancing heavy platters, weaving deftly between the crowded benches. Their faces are flushed from the heat of the kitchen, and they move with the speed of those who know the Lord does not tolerate delays when it comes to his table. The noise swells, the clink of knives on platters, the scrape of benches on stone, bursts of laughter from a table of guards who've already begun swapping stories of the day. Somewhere a minstrel strikes up a gentle tune on a lute, his fingers dancing over the strings as he weaves a soft melody through the background hum. At the high table, the conversation is quieter, more deliberate. The Lord leans toward a visiting knight, discussing in low tones the condition of a distant road and whether certain tolls should be increased. The lady listens occasionally, interjecting with a question or observation. Politics in a castle rarely rest, even over a shared meal. A servant offers you a trencher. You tear a piece of coarse bread from its edge and dip it into the thick pottage, the broth rich with leeks, barley, and a hint of rosemary. Beside it, a slice of roasted venison glistens in the firelight, tender and deeply savory. The ale in your cup is warm but smooth, its malty sweetness balancing the heaviness of the food. The minstrel's song changes now a livelier tune. A few guards stamp their boots in time, and a ripple of laughter spreads when one of them tries a clumsy step in imitation of a courtly dance. A stable boy, carrying an empty platter back toward the kitchen, grins at the sight before disappearing through the door. The meal moves at its own unhurried pace. Between courses, servants sweep away used trenchers and refill cups. The next round of food appears spiced stews, thick with dried fruits, platters of hard cheese and small pies filled with minced meat and herbs. The smell of cinnamon and clove lingers faintly in the air, a rare luxury, in a place where most meals rely on the bounty of local fields and forests. Toward the end of the meal, a platter of small sweetmeats appears for the high table: honeyed almonds, wafers, scented with rosewater, and baked pears drizzled with syrup. These are the sorts of luxuries that mark the difference between the Lord's table and the fare of the common bench. Down the hall, the soldiers content themselves with the last of the pottage and bread, their laughter louder now, their cheeks flushed from drink. When the final cups are drained, the Lord rises. Conversation halts for a moment, all eyes on him. His words are brief thanks for the day's work, a nod to the visiting guests, and a reminder to keep the gates secure against the deepening night. With that, he steps down from the dais, the lady following gracefully at his salud. The high table empties, and the rest of the hall begins to disperse. Some head straight for their beds, bellies full, and weariness already tugging at their eyes. Others linger in the glow of the hearth, trading news or playing at dice. The minstrel shifts to a softer tune, something suited for the winding down of the day. You step outside into the cool night air. The sky has deepened to an indigo blue, and the first stars are pricking through. Along the battlements, torches flare against the dark, casting their light in shimmering arcs across the moat. A guard passes you on his way to the watch spear in hand, boots crunching softly against the stone. In the quiet yard, you hear the faint rustle of straw as stable hands check on the horses one last time before locking the doors. The air carries the scent of hay wood smoke and the distant tang of the forge still cooling from its work earlier in the day. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then settles again. You find yourself drawn to the wall walk. Climbing the narrow steps to the battlements, you emerge into the open wind. From here, the world beyond the castle looks calm, a dark sea of rolling fields and forest stretching to the horizon. Yet the watchmen know better. Even on a peaceful night, dangers can come without warning. Their eyes sweep the distance, attuned to any flicker of movement, any unnatural sound. The air is sharp against your face. You lean on the cold stone, watching a thin mist rise from the moat below. The drawbridge is up its heavy timbers, resting firmly against the gatehouse. Above you, the stars are brighter now, the constellations slowly wheeling overhead as the earth turns. After a while, you descend again into the courtyard. The activity here has stilled even further. A few servants cross quickly between doorways, their arms full of folded blankets or baskets of rushes to scatter on the floors for the morrow. The faint glow from the kitchen windows hints at the last tasks being finished before the fires are banked for the night. You pause near the well, the air still enough that you can hear the faint trickle of water far below. The sound is strangely soothing, a reminder that even in a fortress of stone and iron, the simplest of elements, water bread, warmth are what sustain life. As the castle settles fully into the night, you feel the pull of your own bed once again. The day's images drift in your mind, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the rich smell of roasting meat, the golden torchlight spilling across the courtyard. All of it seems to fold in on itself now, softening into a tapestry of sound and scent that will carry you toward sleep. You slip quietly through the corridors toward your chamber, the stones cool beneath your touch, the air holding that faint, age-old chill. Tonight the castle sleeps, and so will you within the shelter of its ancient walls. The candle in your chamber has burned low, its wick curling into a thin twist of smoke. You lie in bed for a while, letting the muffled hum of the castle's nighttime breath wash over you. Somewhere far off, a guard's boot scrapes faintly along the battlements. A door shuts with a soft thud. Then silence, the kind that comes only in places built to endure. But sleep doesn't hold you yet. Curiosity stirs as if the castle is whispering that there's still more to see before dawn returns. You pull on your cloak, push open the door, and step into the dim corridor. The air is cool against your face, and the rushes on the floor crunch softly underfoot. A single torch flickers in its iron sconce, its light barely reaching the arched ceiling above. You take the spiral stair down, moving slowly, your hand trailing along the worn stone of the inner wall. The steps are narrow, uneven in places where centuries of boots have worn them smooth. At the base, you pass a thick oak door bound in blackened iron. It is bolted fast to the entrance to the cellar. You lift the heavy latch and step inside. The air is instantly cooler, tinged with the mingled scents of earth-old wood and stored grain. The cellar ceiling is low, supported by stout beams darkened with age. Around you are barrels of ale stacked too high, their curved sides beaded faintly with moisture. In one corner, sacks of flour are piled against the wall, each tied tight with twine. In another, strings of onions and garlic hang in neat loops. A narrow passage leads deeper still into the wine store. Here the air is heavier, thick with the rich scent of aging wine. The barrels rest in shadow, marked with chalk to show the year they were laid down. Some are very old indeed, their wood dry and dark, holding vintages reserved for the most important occasions. You imagine the Lord drawing from these stores for a feast marking a wedding, a victory, or a long-awaited return. From the wine store, a second passage slopes gently downward into the cool, damp hush of the undercroft, a vaulted space beneath the keep itself. Here, stone pillars rise to meet the ceiling, in graceful curves, their bases ringed with faint moss from the constant damp. This space is part storage, part stronghold, a place where goods or people could be kept safe in times of siege. At one end of the undercroft, a heavy door leads into a darker chamber still. The smell here changes less of earth, more of iron and disuse. This is the dungeon. Its walls are bare except for the occasional ring set into the stone. The air is cold and heavy, pressing in on your chest. You do not linger. Even empty the place carries the memory of suffering. Stepping back into the undercroft, you climb another stair that rises sharply toward the courtyard. You emerge into the open air once again, the night wrapped around you. The torches along the walls sway slightly in a passing breeze. The moon is higher now, casting silver light over the rooftops. You drift toward the outer wall where a narrow postern gate sits locked. This small door is used for quiet comings and goings, a way to slip people or messages in and out without opening the great gates. Tonight it is barred, the iron bolt gleaming faintly in the moonlight. From here, a path leads you toward the southern tower. Inside the spiral stairs, climb tightly, the walls damp in places from the cool night air. You emerge onto a narrow wall walk that runs along the inner side of the battlements. A guard nods to you in passing, his spear tip catching the torchlight. He moves on without a word, pacing his silent watch. You pause near an arrow slit and look out. Beyond the moat, the land rolls gently away, fields silvered by moonlight. In the far distance, a stand of trees stirs faintly in the breeze. Somewhere among them, you imagine the glint of eyes, a fox perhaps, or a deer slipping quietly through the shadows. Further along the wall walk, you reach the tower's upper chamber. Here a brazier burns low, casting a warm orange glow on the faces of two men seated nearby. One is mending a length of chainmail, the pliers clicking softly in the quiet. The other whittles at a piece of wood, curls of shavings gathering at his feet. They glance up briefly as you enter, then return to their work, each absorbed in the quiet companionship of shared watch duty. From the southern tower, you descend again into the heart of the castle. The courtyard is nearly empty now, save for a kitchen boy carrying a bucket of scraps toward the pig pen. The animals stir at his approach, their low grunts carrying across the yard. He tips the bucket, and the smell of vegetable peelings and stale bread drifts briefly before the pigs settle to their meal. You cross to the chapel, drawn again to its stillness. Inside, the single lamp still burns before the altar, though it has guttered lower. The priest is gone now, but the space holds his absence like a held breath. The air is cool, scented with the faint sweetness of beeswax. You sit for a moment in the front pew, letting the quiet seep into you. When you step back outside, the castle's sounds have softened even more. A faint creak of timber from the stables, the occasional clink of metal from a guard shifting his weapon, the distant hoot of an owl. You realize how far removed this life is from the noisy chaos of the outer world, the constant chatter of market squares, the clamor of merchants and carts, the unpredictable flow of strangers. Here the rhythms are slower, steadier, bound by walls and by habit. Back in your chamber, you sit for a moment on the edge of the bed, loosening the ties of your cloak. You feel the faint scratch of wool on your fingertips, the weight of the day settling into your limbs. Outside your narrow window, the stars are wheeling slowly across the sky. You lie down, drawing the blanket over you, and close your eyes. Somewhere in the quiet distance, a guard calls to another on the wall, their voices muffled by the stone. The castle sleeps, but it never fully rests, a living thing whose pulse you've now felt in its deepest, quietest hours. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on another day of work, of watch, of the endless, steady rhythm that keeps this fortress alive. For now, you drift slowly toward sleep, safe within its thick walls and ancient heart. You wake again, this time, to the faintest thread of light creeping along the seam of your shuttered window. Dawn in the castle does not come all at once. It begins with a pale grayness seeping slowly into stone corridors, glancing faintly off polished wood and brass, and stirring those whose work must begin before the day properly arrives. From your bed you hear the distant scrape of the kitchen door as someone slips outside to draw water from the well. The bucket's iron handle clinks gently as it is lowered. There's the faint splash of it striking the surface far below, then the creak of the winch pulling it back up. You lie for a moment listening to the rhythm, steady, ancient, unchanged for centuries. The air in your chamber is cool enough to make you hesitate before throwing back the blanket. The rushes on the floor feel crisp beneath your bare feet. As you pull on your tunic and cloak, the scent of last night's fire still lingers faintly in the wool. You step into the corridor, where the light is softer still, barely catching in the wavering flame of a torch set into the wall. You take the familiar spiral staircase down into the lower hall. The stones feel cold under your boots, and the air carries that mingled scent of damp stone wool and wood smoke. The great hall is nearly empty. A few servants move briskly along the edges of the room, sweeping away the rushes laid the day before and scattering new ones. These are fresh green and fragrant, woven with lavender mint or sweet woodruff to keep the air pleasant and deter pests. In the far corner, the fire has been stoked again, its low roar filling the hall with warmth. A cook kneels beside it, stirring a pot that will become the morning pottage. You catch the smell of barley and leeks, hearty and plain. On a nearby trestle table, trenchers of coarse bread are being set out alongside small bowls of salted butter. The Lord is not yet awake, but the steward is already here, speaking quietly with two men in workman's tunics. One carries a folded length of parchment. The other gestures toward the outer walls as he speaks. You imagine they are discussing repairs, perhaps a loose stone in the battlements or damage to the outer gate. These conversations begin early when the day is still soft, so that the necessary work can be set in motion before the sun climbs high. You leave them to their business and step out into the courtyard. The sky overhead is pale, streaked with the faintest blush of morning. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and the sharp freshness that comes before the sun dries the dew. A few hens scratch in the dust near the stables, clucking softly. Somewhere above, a raven croaks from a perch along the wall. The stable yard is already alive. Grooms lead horses from their stalls into the open air, brushing down their coats until they shine. The destriers, tall and powerful, toss their heads impatiently, stamping at the ground, as if eager for work. Smaller palfreys stand more calmly, their eyes half closed in contentment, as they are saddled for light riding. Beyond the stables, in a small enclosed paddock, a group of squires are feeding the hunting dogs. The hounds' tails whip back and forth as they gulp down their portions, the air rich with the smell of raw meat. The kennel master watches closely, ensuring each animal gets its share. From here, your path takes you toward the outer curtain wall. The masons are already at work, their tools clinking softly against the stone. One kneels at the base of the wall, pressing fresh mortar between the blocks. Another checks the alignment of a newly fitted stone with a careful eye. Repairing the walls is an endless task, for wind, rain, and frost never rest. You climb a narrow stair to the wall walk, where the view spills wide in the clean morning light. Beyond, the moat fields stretch toward the edge of the forest, their furrows catching the first rays of the sun. Here and there, you can see wisps of smoke rising from the cottages of farmers who live under the Lord's protection. Farther still, the dark mass of the woods begins its tangled canopy, hiding countless paths, streams, and perhaps a few secrets known only to those who hunt there. A watchman greets you with a nod. His spear rests lightly in his hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. At this hour, the world feels open and peaceful. Yet the stillness is deceptive. He knows as well as anyone that trouble can appear without warning. You follow the wall walk toward the gatehouse. Below, the drawbridge is being lowered for the first time today, its chains clanking as it eases down to meet the road. The portcullis remains raised for now, its black iron teeth gleaming faintly in the light. Two guards stand to either side, speaking in low voices as they watch for the first arrivals. Already you see movement on the road, a small cart drawn by a sway-backed mule, its driver bundled against the morning chill. Behind it walks a man leading a pair of goats, their bells chiming softly as they come closer. The day's business at the gate is about to begin. You descend into the gatehouse where the sergeant of the watch stands with his ledger. He greets the carter, inspects his load, and exchanges a few words before waving him through. The goats follow their hooves, tapping against the timbers of the drawbridge. The sounds echo faintly in the chamber as they pass. Once outside the gatehouse again, you make your way back into the heart of the castle. In the kitchen yard, a woman kneels beside a low bench, shaping dough into neat rounds. The bakehouse oven smokes gently, its arched mouth glowing faintly from the fire within. Soon the smell of baking bread will fill the yard, drifting even up to the battlements. Nearby, the brewhouse is busy as well. A young man stirs a vat of ale with a long wooden paddle, the surface foaming gently. The air here is heavy with the warm scent of malt and yeast. Brewing is as much a part of the castle's life as guarding the walls, a daily rhythm, as essential as the changing of the watch. By mid-morning, the sun has fully risen, pouring light into the courtyard. The chill begins to lift, and the air hums faintly with the sounds of work. The ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the rasp of a saw in the carpenter's shed, the shouts of squires as they practice in the yard. You pause for a moment, taking it in, the ordered bustle, the mingling scents of wood-smoke bread and fresh air. The shifting tapestry of voices and footsteps. This is the castle's true heartbeat, not the great feasts or the rare ceremonies, but the countless small acts that repeat every day, weaving life through stone walls that have stood for generations. Somewhere deep inside you, there's the quiet awareness that you could walk these same paths tomorrow, or 100 years ago, and see almost the same sights. The faces would change, the fashions alter, but the rhythm, the rise and fall of the castle's daily tide would remain the same. And as you turn toward the great hall once more, ready to see what the rest of the morning brings, you realize you've begun to feel not just like a visitor here, but almost like someone who belongs. The morning in the great hall is different from the solemn quiet of night or the hushed first light before work begins. By now, the benches are half filled with those taking their first meal of the day. The smell of fresh bread and warm ale drifts thick through the air, mingled with the faint smoke curling from the central hearth. The fire's orange glow dances across the carved beams, catching here and there on a glint of brass, or the dull gleam of a helmet left on a table. You pass by the long trestle tables where men-at-arms sit hunched over their trenchers. They eat steadily, but without great ceremony, coarse bread, thick pottage, a wedge of cheese, perhaps a slice of yesterday's cold meat, if they're fortunate. The ale is dark and mild, poured into wooden cups that have been used by the same hands for years. Conversation here is practical, brief words about guard rotations, the weather, or the mending of gear. At the high table, the Lord's family takes their meal with a touch more formality. The bread is finer, the cheese softer, and the ale sweeter. A servant stands quietly behind the Lord's chair, ready to fill his cup or fetch an extra portion. The lady speaks with a visiting guest, perhaps a reeve from a nearby village, about the planting of spring barley in the outer fields. Every word is careful. Even breakfast here is threaded with the quiet business of governance. Once the meal is finished, the hall begins to empty. Servants move in to clear trenchers, sweep away crumbs, and refresh the rushes underfoot. The air, momentarily filled with the sound of many voices, slips back into the softer hum of daily work. The steward and the clerk carry parchments to a side chamber, where accounts will be reckoned. The Lord retreats to his solar with his chaplain, and a man in a hooded cloak, perhaps to discuss a matter not meant for wider ears. You step outside again into the brightening courtyard. The sunlight is higher now, glancing off the pale stone and throwing strong shadows beneath the walkways. The armory is alive with the scrape of whetstones as weapons are sharpened. A young squire polishes a steel breastplate until he can see his own reflection in it. The master-at-arms checks racks of spears, ensuring the shafts are sound and the iron tips securely fastened. From the armory, your path takes you toward the training ground. Here, a group of younger squires are practicing mounted skills. They guide their horses at a trot toward wooden quintains, rotating targets with a broad shield on one side and a weighted bag on the other. If a rider strikes too softly or misses entirely, the bag swings around to knock them from the saddle. Laughter and a few groans follow each attempt while the master shouts sharp corrections. Nearby archers are testing their bows. The steady snap of bowstrings sends arrows thudding into straw butts lined against the far wall. A fletcher stands off to one side, repairing bent shafts and replacing frayed strings. His table is scattered with feathers, glue pots, and small knives, the tools of a craft, as vital to defense as the work of the smith. Past the training yard, you find the falconer tending to his birds. The hoods over their heads keep them calm as he checks each one's jesses and inspects the condition of their feathers. The mews smell faintly of hay and raw meat. In the corner, a young boy scrapes clean a perch, while another washes feeding bowls. Hunting with hawks is not only a noble pastime, but a source of fresh game rabbits, pheasants, or even the occasional duck from the nearby marshes. Following the outer walkway, you make your way toward the gardens. Within these sheltered plots grow the castle's herbs, parsley, thyme, sage, and rosemary for the kitchen, comfrey fever few, and yarrow for the infirmary. The gardener, a stooped figure in a patched tunic, works quietly with a wooden hoe, loosening the earth around the roots. He glances up just long enough to nod a greeting before returning to his task. In one corner, a small bed of leeks stands tall, their green leaves shining in the sun. You wander onward to the laundry yard. Here, two women bend over broad tubs, scrubbing tunics against wooden boards, their sleeves rolled high and hands red from the cold water. Steam rises faintly where buckets of hot water have been poured in from the kitchen fires. Lines strung between poles hold rows of dripping linen that flutter gently in the breeze. The smell here is a mix of soap root, damp cloth, and fresh air. From the laundry yard, you hear the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer calling again. In his forge, the heat presses in, smelling of iron and charcoal. He shapes a new horseshoe on the anvil, sparks jumping with every strike. The apprentice works the bellows with steady determination, feeding the fire until it roars. On a nearby bench lie completed pieces, spear tips, hinges, nails, and tools for the carpenter. Every item is essential to keep the castle's daily life in motion. By now, the sun is well up and the morning work is in full swing. In the kitchen yard, a servant chops onions for the midday meal, blinking against the sting. The bakehouse door stands open, and the smell of warm bread drifts into the yard. A woman passes you carrying a basket piled high with loaves bound for the great hall. You follow her inside, where the hall is being readied once more. The trestle tables are set with cups and trenchers, and the hearth fire is blazing. A spit turns slowly over the flames, roasting a pair of small boars until their skins are deep brown and glistening. The smell is rich and mouth-watering, drawing more than one curious glance from those passing through. While the kitchen bustles, the outer gatehouse grows busy as well. Merchants arrive with carts and baskets, a man with a load of salted fish packed in straw, a woman carrying a crate of early apples, a boy leading a pair of geese with their feet loosely bound. The gate guards check each arrival, noting their goods in the ledger before letting them pass. Some merchants are regulars, others strangers whose goods and faces must be weighed with a careful eye. Beyond the gate, you can just see the road curling away toward the nearest market town. It's a reminder that the castle is not a world entirely unto itself. Goods, news, and people pass through, carrying with them a trace of the wider world. But once they step inside the gate, they move according to the castle's rhythm. By late morning, the pace in the yard quickens. Servants hurry between the kitchen and the hall. The smith works through his last order before the midday break, and the training yard echoes with the final shouts of the master-at-arms before he dismisses the squires for their meal. The sun throws long slants of light across the flagstones, catching on the edges of helmets and the bright points of spear tips stacked neatly in a rack. The day's pattern is as steady as the heartbeat of the place. There are no wasted moments here, no idle hands for long. Each person knows their duty, and each duty ties to another in an intricate weave that holds the castle together. And as the steward's voice calls for the midday meal to be served, you feel again that sense of belonging to the slow, deliberate pulse of this stone-bound world. You turn toward the hall, following the others inside, ready to take your place at the table beneath the watchful beams and the flickering firelight. The great hall is alive once more with the sounds of a meal in progress. The midday light slants through the narrow windows, making bright strips across the trestle tables and the rushes underfoot. The air is warm from the hearth fire, and thick with the scents of roasting meat, fresh bread, and the faint tang of ale. You take a place along one of the lower tables. A servant ladles pottage into a shallow wooden bowl before you, thick with lentils, carrots, and chunks of salted pork. Beside it, a trencher of bread, coarse and still faintly warm from the bakehouse. A jug of small beer is passed down the table, each person filling their own cup, before setting it back for the next. The rhythm is practiced unhurried, a daily ritual as familiar as breathing. The talk around you is low and steady news of the fields, a guard's tale of a troublesome gate hinge, a woman describing how the laundry took twice as long this morning because of a stubborn stain in the Lord's tablecloths. Here, over shared bread and ale, the day's small troubles and victories are exchanged like coin. At the high table, the Lord sits with the steward and a visiting knight. The knight's surcoat bears a crest you do not recognize, a reminder that even in this enclosed world, there are still connections and obligations stretching far beyond the castle walls. Their conversation is serious, but not tense, the tone of men discussing roads, patrols, and perhaps a marriage alliance between distant kin. The lady of the castle speaks quietly to the chaplain at her side, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The meal moves in waves. Trenchers are replaced with plates of roasted boar, the meat sliced thick and laid beside mounds of onions browned in dripping. Bowls of peas and leeks cooked until soft are passed along the benches. Here and there you hear the scrape of knives against wooden plates as someone carves another piece. In between courses, a servant collects empties and drops fresh loaves into baskets. The bread is torn by hand, shared out along the table without fuss. The small beer flows freely, not strong enough to muddle the mind, but enough to ease the weariness of the morning's work. You find yourself watching the fire in the great hearth. The logs crack and shift, sending small bursts of sparks upward into the smoke-blackened hood. Above it, a spit turns slowly, driven by a boy using a treadwheel hidden in a recess. The meat is already cooked for this meal, but the fire will be used again to heat water for washing and to keep the hall warm against the afternoon chill. When the final platters are cleared, the Lord rises from the dais. The hall stills for a moment as he thanks his household for their service and reminds the guards of the need for vigilance on the walls. His voice carries a weight not of fear but of habit, as if the words themselves are part of the castle's defenses. Then he departs, followed by the lady and a small knot of attendants. The rest of the hall empties quickly. Servants carry the trestle boards aside to sweep the rushes and gather crumbs for the pigs. The smell of food lingers in the air, mingled with the fresh green scent of the new rushes. Outside, the courtyard is bright and busy again. The blacksmith's hammer rings from across the yard, each strike echoing against the stone. A cart creaks in through the gate, its wheels splashed with mud from the road. The driver calls a greeting to the guards and heads toward the stores. Two boys follow, one carrying a sack of oats, the other balancing a crate of hens. The birds cluck and flutter their wings, rattling against the wicker sides. You wander toward the southern end of the yard where the carpenter is working beneath a lean-to. He is planning a thick board, smooth the curls of wood falling at his feet in pale ribbons. Beside him, an apprentice hammers iron nails into the frame of a chest, the sharp thud of each blow muffled slightly by the thick planks. From here, you follow the sound of voices to the laundry yard. The morning's wash is almost dry now, tunics and linens flapping lightly in the afternoon breeze. Two women fold the pieces into neat stacks, talking quietly as they work. One pauses to shade her eyes against the sun, glancing toward the gate as a group of riders approaches from the road. You cross the yard in time to see them arrive. The riders wear travel-stained cloaks, their horses splashed with dust. The leader dismounts easily and greets the gate sergeant. A quick exchange follows, words too low for you to catch, and then the newcomers are led inside. Their saddlebags are thick and heavy, suggesting a long journey. A stable boy hurries forward to take the horses, leading them toward the cool shadow of the stables. Curious, you follow the newcomers into the outer hall. The steward meets them there, ushering them toward the solar where the Lord waits. The door closes behind them with a soft thump, leaving you with the sense that some matter of weight is being discussed. Life in the castle may seem self-contained, but news and visitors from beyond the walls always ripple through its routines. Turning back toward the courtyard, you notice a group gathering near the chapel. It is the chaplain speaking to a cluster of servants and guards. His tone is measured, the words carrying the rhythm of instruction, perhaps arranging tomorrow's service or reminding them of a saint's feast to be observed. The people nod, some crossing themselves before dispersing back to their work. The afternoon moves steadily on. In the training yard, the squires have returned to their drills. The clash of wooden practice swords rings out again, punctuated by the sharp bark of the master-at-arms corrections. Near the wall, a pair of boys chase a runaway chicken, their laughter trailing behind them as they dodge between barrels and carts. From somewhere along the battlements comes the faint call of a guard changing watch. His replacement answers from below, and the sound of boots on stone marks the changeover. The rhythm of guard duty never falters, no matter what else stirs inside the walls. You climb the nearest stair to the wall walk and take in the view. The sun has begun its slow descent, softening the light over the fields beyond the moat. A faint haze blurs the far edge of the forest. From up here, the sounds of the courtyard below seem smaller. The hammer on the anvil, the murmur of voices, the occasional bark of a dog. As you lean on the battlement, you feel the rough texture of the stone beneath your fingers, worn smooth in places by countless other hands. It's a small reminder that every person who has stood here before you has seen some version of this view, the same walls, the same fields, the same endless watch over the land. The day will not end for some hours yet, but you can already sense the subtle shift toward evening. Shadows stretch longer across the yard. The cooks will soon be stoking the fires for the night's feast. The gates will be inspected, the animals settled, and the wall walks manned against whatever the night may bring. And you will keep walking these paths, seeing the castle prepare itself once more for the cycle to begin again. The lowering sun slants its light across the courtyard, gilding the edges of roof tiles and catching in the ripples of the moat. The air feels different now, less bright and busy, more deliberate, as though the castle itself senses that it must gather its strength for the night ahead. From the wall walk you descend into the outer yard. The blacksmith is putting the last touches on the day's work, quenching a glowing horseshoe in a bucket of water. Steam hisses upward in a brief cloud. He sets the cooled iron aside with a small nod of satisfaction, then begins putting away his tools. The forge fire will be left banked overnight, glowing faintly until it's stoked again at dawn. The kitchen yard is already stirring with preparations for the evening meal. A pair of servants carry baskets of vegetables from the garden, the greens still damp with dew from the shaded earth. Another comes from the larder with a side of salted pork over his shoulder. The air here is a mingling of scents, chopped leeks, crushed garlic, and the rich aroma of meat beginning to roast over the kitchen hearth. Inside the kitchen, the great cauldron bubbles, steadily filling the room with steam. A cook sprinkles in handfuls of herbs, rosemary, sage, a pinch of thyme, while another bastes a joint of beef with its own sizzling juices. A boy turns the spit with practiced rhythm, his eyes on the meat to ensure it browns evenly. In the far corner, a table is crowded with pies in various stages of preparation, some already crimped and ready for the oven, others still being filled with minced meat and onions. The bakehouse next door is equally alive. The oven's arched mouth glows with stored heat from the morning's firing. Loaves sit on a long wooden peel ready to be slid into the chamber. The baker works quickly, the smell of yeast and flour dust hanging thick in the warm air. Soon those loaves will be cooling on racks, their crusts crackling faintly as they meet the cooler evening air. In the hall, servants spread fresh rushes on the floor and set long trestles in place. They lay trenchers of bread for each seat, along with jugs of ale spaced evenly along the benches. The high table is dressed with more care, a fine linen cloth, polished silver cups, and a small bowl of salt, a mark of status and wealth. Meanwhile, the steward moves through the hall with a tablet of wax in hand, checking with the servers on quantities and arrangements. His voice is calm but brisk. Every detail matters for a feast, however modest, is a display of the castle's order and hospitality. Outside the drawbridge is lowered again for late arrivals. A pair of travelers approaches, one on horseback, the other leading a mule loaded with sacks. They're met by the gate guard, who examines their goods before waving them through. The travelers head for the outer stable where a groom takes their reins. They'll likely be lodged in the guest quarters if space permits, or in the hall itself if the lord deems it suitable. In the fading light, you pass by the kennels. The hounds are fed once more, their deep barking, echoing briefly before settling into a satisfied quiet. The kennel master scratches one behind the ears, murmuring to it, as the animal leans into his hand. These dogs are as much part of the castle's defense as they are its hunts, their sharp senses ready to catch any movement or scent that doesn't belong. The falcons in the mews are settled as well, their hoods drawn over their eyes. The falconer hangs up their tethers with care, ensuring each bird is comfortable and still. The smell of clean straw mixes with the faint musk of feathers. In the courtyard, the last of the day's work winds down. A cart of split firewood is stacked near the kitchen entrance. Buckets of water are drawn from the well and set near the kitchen door for washing dishes later in the night. The sound of the well's rope creaking and the bucket splashing has become part of the evening's steady rhythm. As the sun dips below the horizon, torches are lit along the battlements. Their flames flicker in the cool breeze, casting rippling shadows on the stone. The guards make their rounds, checking the bolts on doors, the hinges on gates, the ropes on the drawbridge. Each man knows his route by heart, every corner of wall and tower as familiar as his own bed. Inside the hall, the first guests begin to arrive for the evening meal. The lord and lady enter together, pausing to speak with a visiting knight and his retinue. The air fills slowly with conversation, the hum building as more people take their places. The torches on the walls are bright now, their light dancing across the timbered ceiling. The meal begins with the blessing, the chaplain's voice carrying clearly in the warm air. The first course is served trenchers topped with slices of cold meat, pickled vegetables, and soft cheese. The ale flows freely, the cups refilled before they are empty. Soon, the main dishes arrive, roasted beef, seasoned pies, bowls of vegetables swimming in butter. The smell is rich and comforting, a deep note of warmth in the stone-walled hall. Servants weave between benches with practiced ease, carrying steaming platters from kitchen to table without spilling a drop. The sound of eating mingles with talk and laughter. At the high table, the lord discusses news from the nearby market town, a shipment of wool arriving ahead of schedule, a dispute over fishing rights in a stream that marks part of his boundary. The lady listens attentively occasionally, leaning toward the steward to pass along a quiet instruction. At the lower tables, stories are told more freely. A guard recounts a fox sighting near the henhouse. A kitchen maid speaks of a merchant who brought rare spices in tiny packets. Dice clatter against the wood as a small group begins a game in the corner. Between courses, the minstrel steps forward with a lute. His fingers pick out a slow, lilting tune at first, a ballad of a knight's return from distant lands, before shifting into a quicker melody, that draws a few claps from the lower tables. His voice carries over the warm hum of the hall, the words weaving through the flickering torchlight. When the final dishes are cleared, sweetmeats are brought for the high table candied nuts, small pastries filled with spiced fruit wafers dusted with sugar. The Lord raises his cup in thanks, offering a few words of goodwill before the company begins to break apart for the night. Outside, the air is cool and faintly damp. The last light has faded from the sky, leaving only the stars above and the torch-lit walls around you. The gates are secured, the drawbridge raised until it rests tight against the gatehouse. The night watch settles into its slow circuit boots, whispering over stone. From the stables comes the quiet sound of horses shifting in their stalls. The blacksmith's forge is dark now, the anvil cold. The yard smells faintly of wood smoke hay, and the distant sweetness of baking bread still cooling in the kitchen. You stand for a moment in the quiet, letting the castle's nighttime voice settle around you, the occasional creak of wood, the far-off call of a guard, the soft rustle of leaves beyond the walls. The day's work is done and the night has claimed the keep once more. The torches along the battlements sway gently in the night breeze, their flames bending and flaring. Above you, the stars hang bright and steady, constellations unchanged, since long before this castle's walls were raised. Somewhere beyond the curtain wall, the moon peers over the treetops, silvering the edges of the leaves and throwing long, pale glimmers over the moat's still water. You cross the courtyard slowly, hearing your own footsteps echo against the stone. The sounds of the feast have faded into memory. Now the keep hums with a quieter life. Guards pass by in pairs, their spears glinting in the torchlight. A stable boy carries a lantern toward the kennels, the yellow light bobbing in the dark. From a high tower comes the faint clang of a bell, a signal for the changing of the watch. Drawn by the sound, you climb a narrow stair to the wall walk. The night air is sharp against your face, and the cold stone beneath your hands feels older than memory. The watch captain stands near the southern tower, speaking softly to the men taking over the next shift. They exchange brief nods. There is no room here for long farewells, and those relieved of duty head for the warmth of the guard room below. The new watch takes its place, pacing slowly along the wall. One pauses at an arrow slit to scan the dark beyond. Another leans over the parapet for a moment, listening to the faint rustle of the trees. Their vigilance is a living thing, unbroken, tireless, for the castle's safety depends on it. From this height, the land beyond looks hushed and timeless. A ribbon of road winds away toward unseen villages, its pale track catching the moonlight in places. The forest is a darker mass against the horizon, and somewhere within it, an owl hoots its call, carrying clearly in the stillness. You walk the length of the wall walk, your boots sounding softly on the worn stone. The scent of wood smoke drifts upward from the courtyard, mingled with the faint tang of damp earth. At the far tower, a brazier burns low, casting a small circle of light over a pair of guards huddled close to its heat. One is sharpening a dagger, the rhythmic scrape of stone on steel, a slow, steady counterpoint to the night. From here you descend into the north tower. The spiral stairs turn tightly, the shadows deep between the flickers of torchlight. You emerge into a narrow chamber where two men are mending a length of chainmail, the tiny metal rings glinting in the lamplight. They work in companionable silence, each movement practiced and precise. Beside them, a rack of spears leans against the wall, ready for whatever the night might bring. Stepping back outside, you make your way toward the postern gate. It is barred for the night, its heavy beam resting securely in iron brackets. The guard stationed here checks it once more, running his hand along the bolt, to be certain. Beyond the gate, only darkness waits the quiet countryside, folded deep under the cover of night. The chapel door stands slightly ajar, and you slip inside. The air is cool and scented faintly with beeswax and stone. A single candle burns before the altar, its flame steady in the stillness. In the front pew, a monk sits bowed in prayer, his voice a low murmur barely audible over the hush. The flickering light paints soft shadows across the carved stone walls. Here, the noise and duty of the castle fall away, leaving only the steady rhythm of breath and whispered devotion. When you leave the chapel, the courtyard feels darker by contrast. Your eyes adjust slowly, picking out the pale shapes of sleeping hounds curled near the kennels, their chests rising and falling in the lamplight. The last of the servants cross the yard, heading toward their quarters. One carries a bundle of fresh rushes for the hall tomorrow. Another cradles a small bundle of kindling for the early kitchen fire. You pass through the kitchen yard, now quiet, except for the faint creak of a shutter in the wind. The fires have been banked, the embers glowing faintly under their blanket of ash. The smell of cooked meat still lingers in the air, mingled with the deeper scent of bread cooling in the bakehouse. On a wooden rack near the wall, several loaves rest beneath a cloth ready for the morning. Climbing the keep's inner stair, you find yourself in a corridor lined with narrow doors. From behind one comes the sound of low laughter, quickly hushed. From another, the muffled rhythm of a lute being plucked, a simple tune meant for no one but the player. Life inside these walls does not end when the workday is done. It shifts into smaller, more private shapes. Your own chamber waits, but curiosity pulls you on. You follow the passage to a small guardroom tucked beneath the tower stairs. Inside, 3 men sit at a rough table playing at dice. A single lantern lights their faces, catching on the small pile of coins between them. They look up briefly as you enter, offering quiet nods before returning to their game. The soft rattle of dice in the cup and the low murmur of wagers fill the room. Leaving them to their play, you head toward the solar. Here the lady of the castle sits by the hearth, her needle flashing in the lamplight. 2 women attend her, one winding skeins of wool, the other sorting through small jars of herbs. The conversation is soft and measured, the kind of talk that carries no further than the circle of light around the fire. Beyond the solar lies the Lord's private chamber. The heavy door is closed, but from within comes the muffled sound of voices. Perhaps he is speaking with his steward or dictating a letter to be sent at first light. The business of the castle, like its watch, does not truly sleep. Returning toward your own quarters, you pass a window slit and glance out. The courtyard below lies in shadow, its lines softened by moonlight. The torches on the walls burn steadily, their glow marking the castle's outline against the night. Somewhere far beyond those walls, the world is vast and uncertain. But here, within the embrace of stone and routine, the night feels contained, almost gentle. When you finally reach your chamber, the air inside is still and cool. You close the door behind you and let the quiet settle around your shoulders like a cloak. The bed weights its wool blankets, heavy and warm. You sit for a moment, loosening your boots, the soft scrape of leather against the floor, the only sound. Lying back, you can still hear faint traces of the castle's life. The footsteps of a guard changing post, the distant creak of a cartwheel as it is moved under shelter, the sigh of wind through the battlements. They are the lullabies of this place, the murmurs that have carried countless others into sleep before you. And as your eyes drift shut, the castle keeps its watch steady, patient, and unyielding, holding you safe in the quiet heart of its long, enduring night. The night deepens, and the quiet within the castle seems to settle more firmly into its stones. Even in your chamber, you can feel the rhythm of it, a slow, steady pulse like the breathing of a great animal at rest. Sleep has taken most within these walls, yet the castle is never truly still. Somewhere above, a watchman paces the wall walk. Somewhere below, a kitchen maid tends the banked embers so that tomorrow's fire will catch quickly. You rise again, drawn by the faint pull of the silent hours. Wrapping your cloak close, you step into the corridor. The torches here burn lower now, their flames swaying gently, casting shadows that stretch long along the floor. The air is cooler, touched by the damp scent of night. You descend the spiral stair, each step ringing softly in the stillness. Passing the guardroom, you glimpse two men hunched over a table. A lantern lights their faces as they whisper over a small map, perhaps marking patrol routes for the coming days. They look up briefly, give a nod, and return to their quiet plotting. Crossing the courtyard, you notice how different it feels now. The moon rides high, painting the stones silver. The air is almost soundless, save for the faint rustle of straw in the stables and the slow, deliberate footsteps of the night watch. In the kennels, the hounds lie curled in deep slumber, their breathing steady, occasionally twitching in some dream of the chase. You climb the nearest stair to the battlements. The view from here is vast in its darkness, rolling fields pale under moonlight, and the darker silhouette of forest beyond. The moat lies still, catching glimmers of silver where the moon's reflection ripples. The guards on duty move with quiet certainty, pausing at intervals to lean over the parapet and scan the horizon. One stops beside you, resting his spear lightly against the stone. His breath clouds faintly in the cool air as he speaks in a low tone about a light he saw earlier on the far ridge. Perhaps it was a traveler's campfire, perhaps nothing at all. But his eyes keep straying to that dark line of hills as if still searching for a sign. You leave him to his watch and follow the wall walk toward the northern tower. Inside the chamber is warmer, a brazier glows in the corner, sending the smell of charcoal into the air. Two guards share a simple meal of bread and cheese, speaking in low voices. On a bench nearby lies a crossbow, strung and ready, its bolt set carefully beside it. Beyond the tower, the wall curves toward the gatehouse. You pause there, looking down at the great wooden doors sealed against the night. The drawbridge rests firmly against the portcullis, its heavy timbers silent now. Below the ditch is a pool of shadow as still as stone. The guard captain stands within the gatehouse arch, his arms folded, eyes fixed on the road beyond. He greets you with a quiet nod, but does not speak. His attention remains on the dark. The scent of oiled leather hangs faintly in the air, mixed with the sharper tang of cold iron from the weapons stored nearby. From here you descend into the undercroft, the vaulted space beneath the keep. The air grows cooler as you move down your footsteps, hollow on the stone. The barrels of ale and sacks of grain stand silent in their places, the long shadows between them undisturbed. Farther in the deeper chambers hold tools, spare timber, and crates marked with chalk symbols known only to the steward and his men. You pause in the wine store, running your hand lightly over the curved staves of a great barrel. The scent here is rich and slightly sweet, as though the wood itself has soaked up centuries of vintages. In the stillness, the faint creak of a cask settling is the only sound. The lowest passage leads to the dungeon. The heavy door is closed and barred, but the air beyond it is colder still, and a hint of dampness seeps through. Even when empty, the dungeon has its own weight, a place where time itself seems to slow, marked only by the drip of unseen water. You do not linger here. Climbing back to the courtyard, you feel the shift in the air, a subtle stirring that says the night is passing its deepest point. The moon has tilted westward, and a faint paling of the eastern sky is just perceptible if you search for it. Somewhere a cockerel gives a short, confused crow, thinking dawn has come too soon. In the kitchen yard, the scullery is dimly lit by a single lantern. A girl sits on a low stool, peeling onions into a wooden bowl. She works slowly, perhaps fighting sleep, but the pile grows beside her all the same. The smell is sharp, cutting through the heavier scents of wood smoke and cooling bread. She glances up with a small smile as you pass, then bends again to her work. You slip inside the kitchen itself. The embers in the hearth glow faintly, radiating a soft, steady heat. A kettle hangs over the warmth, steam curling lazily from its spout. The cook is nowhere to be seen, but on a side table sits a covered loaf and a crock of butter, a quiet night's snack for whoever might need it. Through the side door you step into the garden. In the moonlight, the herbs seem silvered at their edges, thyme, sage, and rosemary giving off faint whispers of scent as the cool air moves over them. The soil is damp underfoot, the rows neat and still. Somewhere at the far end, a small shape darts between the plants, a cat hunting in the shadows. You wander slowly back through the yard, feeling the castle. At this hour, the way its breath seems to come slower, the way even its silence has texture. The night watch continues its steady path along the walls. In the towers, the braziers burn low. Behind shuttered windows, the people sleep, each folded into their own dreams. In your chamber, once more, you sit for a while at the narrow window slit. The night air is cool against your face, carrying faint traces of wood smoke hay and the clean sharpness of distant frost. Below, the torches on the walls burn steadily, their light trembling in the breeze. You can almost believe that the world beyond the castle does not exist at all, that there is only this circle of light, this endless watch against the dark. You lie back at last, the heavy blankets pulling close around you. The faint hum of the night, the distant step of a guard, the creak of wood in the rafters, the occasional sigh of the wind folds over you like another layer of warmth. And as you drift towards sleep again, you know that somewhere in the castle someone is still awake, keeping the fire, keeping the watch, keeping the life of this place unbroken until morning comes. The next time you open your eyes, the darkness is softer. It's still night, but the deep, heavy black of midnight has given way to the first hint of approaching dawn, a faint silver edge low on the horizon. The air feels different now, lighter somehow, as though the castle itself is beginning to stir beneath its blanket of silence. You rise quietly, pushing back the heavy wool blankets. The stone floor is cold against your feet until you pull on your boots. Wrapping your cloak close, you step into the corridor. The torches burn lower than before, their flames smaller, but steady casting pools of amber light that leave the corners in shadow. You make your way to the spiral staircase, the narrow steps worn and smooth from centuries of use. As you descend, the cool air deepens, and you hear the faint scrape of a wooden bucket being dragged across stone. A moment later, you see a scullion boy heading toward the kitchen, carrying the empty pail that he'll soon fill from the well. His eyes are still heavy with sleep, but his pace is brisk. The work will not wait. In the courtyard, the world is hushed. A faint mist clings to the ground, turning the cobblestones soft-edged. The kennels are quiet now, the hounds still curled in their straw. The stables are still, except for a single horse shifting in its stall, the sound of hooves thudding gently against the wooden partition. The guards on the wall-walk have drawn closer to their braziers, rubbing their hands for warmth. They nod as you pass, their breath pale in the air. One murmurs about the cold creeping in. Another answers that the sun will be up soon enough. Their voices are low, as if the very walls are still asleep. Drawn toward the gatehouse, you climb the narrow stair. From here, the view over the moat and the road beyond is mist-shrouded, the horizon blurred. Somewhere in that fog, the land changes from the Lord's immediate domain to the wider world beyond, fields, villages, market towns. But right now, it feels impossibly far away, a place you can only imagine. Within the gatehouse, the guard captain sits at a small table with a candle stub, noting in his ledger the night's patrols and any signs worth recording. The list is short: a fox near the outer ditch, an unfamiliar light in the forest that faded after a time. He nods to you, his expression calm. The absence of trouble is as much a part of his duty as readiness for it. Leaving the gatehouse, you cross to the kitchen yard. Here, life is beginning to stir. The cook has returned, her heavy shawl wrapped tight against the chill. She feeds the banked fire with split logs until it flares up, sending warmth and light flooding across the room. Soon the cauldron is hung once more over the hearth, the water inside beginning to warm for the day's bread stews and washing. Outside by the well, the scullion boy you saw earlier lowers his bucket into the dark shaft. The rope creaks, and there's a faint splash far below. He hauls it up, water sloshing, and tips it into a waiting trough before sending the bucket down again. It's a rhythm older than the castle itself, work that has been done every day for as long as people have lived within these walls. The bakehouse is next to stir. A low orange light glows behind the half-open door, and inside the baker is already mixing the first doughs. The smell of yeast and warm flour fills the air, comforting and steady. He moves with quiet efficiency, shaping each loaf and setting it aside to rise in the cool of the early morning, before the oven is fired. In the brewhouse, a young man stirs the mash for the day's ale. Steam curls up from the vat, carrying the earthy, sweet scent of grain. Brewing is never left too late. The castle's life depends on this drink, safer than most water, nourishing as well as quenching. The process begins before the sun, so that the ale will be ready to serve by midday. The sky beyond the curtain wall has begun to pale in earnest now. You climb to the wall walk once more, drawn by the change in light. From up here, the mist looks thinner, the shapes of fields and hedgerows starting to emerge in the distance. The forest's dark mass still holds its secrets, but the first glints of sunlight touch its edges. A cockerel's call drifts up from somewhere within the bailey, answered by another farther away. The guards watch the sunrise in silence. It is less ceremony than habit. The quiet acknowledgement that another night has passed without alarm. One stretches his arms against the chill. Another leans for a moment on the parapet, his eyes scanning the road for the first traveler of the day. Back in the courtyard, the first true bustle of morning begins. The kennels wake in a flurry of sound as the hounds stir and bark for their feed. The kennel master appears carrying a bucket, and they leap to greet him. In the stables, the grooms begin brushing down the horses, the swish of straw brooms mixing with the warm, earthy scent of the animals. Servants hurry toward the laundry yard with baskets of yesterday's linens. The air is still cold enough that their breath comes in little clouds as they speak to one another. Buckets of hot water arrive from the kitchen, poured into the troughs until steam rises. Soon the sound of cloth being slapped against the boards joins the growing symphony of the morning. From the armory comes the creak of hinges as the door is thrown open. Inside, the master-at-arms checks the racks of weapons. He runs a hand along a row of spear shafts, testing for any weakness, and inspects a stack of shields leaning against the wall. A squire enters, carrying a dull-edged sword for sharpening, and the sound of the whetstone's rasp follows you back into the yard. The chapel bell tolls softly, calling for the first prayers of the day. Its voice is low but clear, rolling out over the bailey and mingling with the bleating of goats from their pen. A few figures in plain robes move toward the small stone building, heads bowed. Within minutes, the door closes behind them, and the murmur of prayer begins. By now, the kitchen is a hive of activity. Bread is coming out of the oven, its crusts crackling faintly as they cool. Pots of pottage bubble, gently filling the air with the rich scent of barley and onions. A platter of soft cheese is set on the table beside baskets of apples, their red skins shining in the lamplight. The first meal of the day will soon be served in the hall. The trestles are already in place, cups and trenchers set, jugs of small beer waiting. The fire in the great hearth burns bright and high, pushing back the last chill of night. And somewhere high in the Lord's solar, the day's first council will begin decisions about crops, repairs, and the small but unending duties that keep a castle breathing. But for now, the morning belongs to the quiet joy of a night well kept, the soft light spilling into every corner, and the knowledge that another day has begun safely within these walls. The sun climbs slowly above the horizon, spilling pale gold over the curtain walls and into the courtyard. The mist retreats toward the far edges of the fields, leaving behind damp cobblestones that glisten underfoot. The castle has fully awakened now, its heartbeat steady and strong. From the great hall comes the sound of benches scraping and the low hum of morning voices. The first meal of the day is being served, and you step inside to find it already well underway. At the high table, the lord and lady share bread, soft cheese, and a jug of warm ale. A servant stands ready behind them, refilling their cups and clearing trenchers with silent efficiency. Down the long benches, guards and servants eat heartier fare, coarse bread still warm from the oven pottage, thick with barley and beans, and the occasional slice of cold meat from last night's roast. The air is filled with the mingled scents of hearth smoke, baking bread, and fresh-cut herbs from the kitchen garden. Conversation is practical, grounded in the day ahead, a loose board in the outer stable roof, a delivery expected from the market town, a squire's scheduled lesson in arms. The meal winds down as quickly as it began. Servants clear the tables, sweeping crumbs into baskets for the pigs. The rushes underfoot are fresh from yesterday, but are already scattered with bits of straw wood shavings and a stray chicken feather or two. The hall will be swept again before noon, just as it is every day. Outside the courtyard is alive with movement. The grooms lead horses from the stables into the morning light. Their coats shine in the sun, the brushing lines still faint on their flanks. One destrier stamps impatiently, tossing its head as the bridle is fitted. Nearby, smaller palfreys stand calm and steady, ready for the day's errands. The kennels are equally busy. The hounds bark and leap against their tethers as the kennel master chooses a handful for a short hunt. Their excitement fills the air, their baying echoing off the stone walls. The chosen dogs are led to the gatehouse where they'll wait until the hunting party is ready to ride. In the laundry yard, women bend over the troughs, slapping wet cloth against smooth boards. The sound is rhythmic, punctuated by short bursts of conversation. Steam rises from buckets of hot water, mingling with the fresh scent of linen drying on the lines strung overhead. The breeze lifts the damp fabric, turning the courtyard into a gallery of white banners. The armory door stands wide, letting in the sunlight. Inside, the master-at-arms checks a rack of spears while a squire polishes the boss of a round shield until it gleams. The scrape of a whetstone on steel comes from the far corner, where another squire sharpens the edge of a practice sword. The air smells of oil leather and the faint metallic tang of freshly ground steel. From the outer yard, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer rings out again. He works at the anvil with measured blows, shaping a length of iron into a sturdy hinge. Sparks leap with each strike, falling in brief showers onto the packed dirt floor. His apprentice works the bellows, feeding the forge with a steady rush of air until the coals glow white-hot. You follow the smell of wood shavings to the carpenter's shed. Here, long planks lean against the wall, waiting to be shaped into furniture doors, or the wooden frames that will reinforce the castle's smaller structures. The carpenter works with a draw knife, pulling long curls from a beam destined to be part of a new chest. His apprentice fits a lid to an almost finished piece, testing the hinges for smooth movement. In the garden, the gardener kneels among the herbs, trimming back a bed of sage. The leaves release their clean, sharp fragrance into the air. Nearby rows of leeks stand tall, their green tops rustling in the breeze. Beyond the herbs, a patch of cabbages glistens with dew, while a small bed of strawberries hints at the sweetness to come when summer is in full bloom. At the far side of the bailey, the falconer tends his birds. The hoods are lifted one by one, and each falcon blinks in the light before being examined for any sign of injury or loose feathers. A young boy cleans the perches and replaces the straw in their mews, working carefully to avoid startling the keen-eyed birds. The day's formal business begins in the solar. The lord meets with his steward, the chaplain, and a reeve from one of the outer villages. Parchments are unrolled across a table, showing neat columns of numbers, grain yields, rents, collected fines imposed. The discussion is steady, practical, a question of which repairs must be done before winter, which can wait until next year. Beyond the numbers, there is news from beyond the castle's lands. A fair in a nearby town, rumors of unrest in a distant shire. Outside in the courtyard, a small group of travelers arrives at the gate. Their cloaks are travel-stained, their boots caked with mud from the road. The gate guards examine their packs before waving them through. A servant leads them to the guest quarters where they will rest before presenting themselves to the lord. Their arrival brings with it the faint scent of distant roads, leather horse sweat, and the dust of other lands. By midday, the pace of work has reached its full rhythm. The kitchen is in motion once again, preparing the day's main meal. Large joints of meat roast slowly over the hearth, their fat dripping into the flames with a hiss. Cauldrons bubble with stews rich in root vegetables, while pies are filled with seasoned pork and covered in pastry. The smell drifts through the hall and out into the yard, carried on the warm air. In the training yard, squires practice with wooden swords, their blows ringing as they strike against shields. The master-at-arms corrects their stance, adjusts their grips, and occasionally cuffs a shoulder for a sloppy parry. At the far end of the yard, archers loose arrows at straw targets, the shafts thudding into their marks. The fletcher sits nearby, repairing broken arrows and replacing frayed fletchings. From the wall walk comes the sound of the midday watch changing. The new guards take their posts, scanning the fields and road beyond. The drawbridge remains lowered for now, welcoming merchants and visitors. In the outer yard, a trader haggles with the steward over a cartload of salted fish, while another offers bolts of dyed wool for the seamstresses. And through it all, the castle's life hums in a perfect balance of work duty and quiet endurance. Each sound, the hammer at the forge, the sweep of a broom, the call of a guard folds into the next, until it becomes one continuous note, the song of a place built to last. You find yourself pausing in the courtyard, watching the sunlight catch on the battlements. The walls look the same as they did yesterday and the day before, and perhaps even a century ago. And that is the true nature of this place, not change but constancy. The sense that no matter what lies beyond the horizon, the rhythm within these walls will hold. The sun begins its slow descent, casting a gentler light across the courtyard. The warmth of midday lingers, but shadows lengthen at the base of towers and along the edges of the walls. The day's work shifts, settling into its quieter closing rhythm. In the great hall, the midday meal is winding down. Trenchers are emptied, cups drained. The steward speaks briefly with the kitchen staff before stepping away to consult a pair of visiting merchants. Servants gather scraps from the tables for the pigs and sweep the rushes into baskets for burning. The smell of roasted meat and bread still hangs in the air, softening as the hearth fire is allowed to burn lower for the afternoon. Outside the training yard is clearing. The squires' faces, flushed from hours of drills, return wooden practice swords to their racks. The master-at-arms dismisses them with a few curt words and a final reminder to sharpen their discipline along with their weapons. Archers unstring their bows and collect the last of the arrows from the targets, their boots crunching softly in the gravel. By the wall walk, the guard captain inspects the posts for the evening watch. He speaks with each man in turn, ensuring they have fresh torches and steady weapons. The brazier in the southern tower is stoked to life, the flames licking eagerly at the new logs. From this height, the light on the surrounding Sund has taken on a softer hue, the fields bathed in gold, the forest edge a darker green shadowed by the sinking sun. In the kitchen yard, preparations for the evening feast have already begun. A cauldron hangs over the great hearth, steam rising as a rich broth simmers. The smell of onions, leeks, and herbs drifts into the open air. At a side table, a pair of cooks knead dough for fresh bread, their hands moving with quick, sure motions. A boy turns a spit slowly, a haunch of venison rotating over glowing coals. The bakehouse oven glows from its afternoon firing. Round loaves are set on wooden peels and slid deep into the chamber, the sound of the baker's work, a soft, steady rhythm. Soon, the crusty scent of baking bread will mix with the sharper tang of roasting meat to fill every corner of the keep.